I went out to Home Depot and I looked at the most affordable option. I found they're about $40 a set for a window, but they were very cheaply made and very easily defeated. They were basically a hollow tube bar that you could pull off of your house very quickly with a rope and a hook. I wanted to build something that was affordable that would also be a little bit more durable. I put together, using fairly inexpensive materials and techniques that anybody can use, I laid out some of the tools that you're going to need. You'll see that I'm using liquid nails, staples. I use T50 half-inch, pliers, gloves, caulk gun, hacksaw, drill. For my screws, I chose these. Name brand is Spax. I'm using number 8, 1.5 inch long. They are self-tapping. That's very important with the type of wood that I'm using. You also need a drill. I use a nice cut-off blade on my grinder so I can cut my rebar. We're using 2x2s, 1x2s. We're using rebar, and we're using 1/2 inch 19 gauge wire mesh netting that you can get at Home Depot. The first step for building these window screens is you need to take your measurement. In order to get the proper measurement, you need to take a look at your window. You're going to notice around your window, this wood here framing is called brick molding. And then you have your windowsill here, which sticks out past the brick molding. You want to make sure you take your measurement, you measure from the top of this windowsill, then to the top of your window. That way when you build your screen, it will sit flush up against the brick molding. The easiest way for me that I found to join your main center section, your 2x2s together, is to go ahead and clamp them down to your workbench so that they're nice and flush and even. Drill a pilot hole right down the middle through the first piece into the second piece. And then I use these, I think they're 16 penny spiral galvanized nails. I have them laying around, but anything should do the job. You just hammer that in place and then you create your joint. Okay, I've gone through and I've done all 4 joints, giving me my center section of 2x2s. Like I said, at this point here, the materials are flimsy. And you're going to wonder how they could ever stand up to someone trying to break into your home. As we tie in the other pieces, it's going to become a very solid structure. Okay, I've cut my wire mesh to match the size of the window. You can use a good pair of side cutters, but with the 1/2 inch mesh it becomes a little tedious. Another thing that works pretty good is a hacksaw with a fine tooth blade. Now what we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and we're going to staple using my stapler with the T50 1/2 inch staples. We're just going to staple it, try and get it as tight as we can, stretched around the frame. Okay, as you can see, the wire mesh is on one side of the screen, the center section. You'll have these little ends sometimes sticking out. I just bend them over. You can go through and trim them all off, but with 14 windows to build, I wasn't worried about the looks. And that's one thing you want to keep in mind is these are not going to be pretty. I'm getting ready to mark the holes for the rebar to fit through. You can decide for yourselves how far apart you want your rebar to be. I found that 8 inches is a pretty good size to where I'm using the least amount of rebar, but it's very difficult for someone to stick their head between 8 inches. and they get their body squeezed through. My first goal with all this was to try and keep the cost down. I was able to build mine for about $40 a window on my large windows. I also didn't choose to go with rebar for the entire window. I went from the bottom. I usually put 3 or 4 sections in. I figured at that point, 1, I can save a little money. 2, if they're going to go and climb up over the last rebar, my windows are tall, high off the ground of my house. They're going to have a step ladder to get that high anyway. Once your marks are done, you're going to use a 1/2 inch bit. Just aim for the center, right where your line is, and go ahead and drill your pilot holes. You're going to do this on both sides of your framework. As you can see, we now have our rebar installed. I went ahead and placed another layer of our wire mesh on the other side of the framework. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to start adding our 1x2s to the outside. As you can see, I went ahead and laid down a thick bead of liquid nails. Before we go ahead and add the 1x2s, I want to show you what I'm doing to add some strength. As you can see, we cut our top and our bottom pieces to the width of the window. And our verticals were cut short and mounted on top. The 1x2s are going to be opposite. The vertical pieces will come all the way to the end, and then the bottom and top pieces will come up short. That way we're overlaying the joints. And when we go ahead and we lay in our piece, the 1x2 inch wood splits very easily. And I didn't use treated wood because I was trying to save cost again. I figured if I put it on the window, it shouldn't be up there more than a year. I can also paint it to the color of the house, which I've got some paint to do so. So I wasn't so much worried about the wood rotting away. But if I go too near the end of this wood, it will split very easily. What I found works very well is to take a screw, go back about 2 inches, 1.5 inches to 2 inches, angle it this way so you're going down through this wood into this bottom piece. That way you're joining the two joints together. And if you can, even maybe go across the grain a little bit. It helps reduce the amount of splitting. Also, being a self-tapping screw, I don't have to worry about pre-drilling. Okay, this side is done. We now have screws up and down both sides. You need to drill holes down the vertical sides so you can attach it to your window. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use these Torx lag bolts. They're high strength, they're 1/4 inch by 4 inch. So I'm going to use a 5/16 drill bit. And I'm going to drill holes in varying places. On this one I'll probably put 3. One for the bottom, one for the middle, and one for the top. The lag bolt will go all the way through and into the brick molding. And because I live in a rental, I'm leaving my lag bolts only through the brick molding. To get the best, most secure fit, you can go with a 5-inch bolt and go through the brick molding and go into the 2x4s that frame the actual window. That way you're tying it right to the house. The nice thing about these, as opposed to a regular lag bolt would be a hex head. You can use a wrench to undo. If you use one of those, in theory, somebody could quietly at night come up with a wrench, unscrew all your lag bolts, and quietly take the screen off your window, bypassing your security measures. This is a special Torx bit, and I'm going to countersink them with this bit here, so that the head is actually below the surface of the wood. That way they can't use a wrench to pull them off. As you can see here, I've got my countersunk holes. I only went about 1/4 inch to 3/8 of an inch in. The bolts fitted nicely, and they sit flush once they're installed. It'd be very difficult for a thief to remove those. The one question that comes up is, what do you do with all these window screens now that you've built them? you don't plan on putting them on your house right away. So what I did is I went into my garage and any available wall space, as you can see, put up some metal hanger brackets and hung them on the wall. They're up out of the way, they're not a nuisance, easily accessed when I need them in case of high crime rates, rioting, disasters.